Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining. We'll be starting in 1 minute. Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining. We'll be starting in 1 minute. Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining. We'll be starting in 1 minute. Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining. Sorry about that. We're streaming live to YouTube, and I didn't mute the microphone or the speaker on my YouTube, so we're good now. Okay, I'm just going to upload the downloads, for everyone so that you can access those if you have not as yet, and then we'll get underway. So I'm now putting into the chat where if you open your chat, you can find a PDF there of my book, The Effective CEO, and also the latest and best slides for today. I made a couple of changes from the ones that I sent around yesterday. So, thank you very much, all. I am so happy to have you here on this momentous day for me, which is the launching of the Effective Managers Academy. This is our first course in a series of 21, where I will be laying out information about organizations, how they work, and sharing with people the learnings that I've had over the years. So I'm really excited about that, and want to start with some of the most fundamental things today that I am able to share with you about organizations. I think just scanning the list, I know most of the people here, but some of you I haven't met in person, that's for sure. So welcome. We have people from North America, we have people from Europe, we have people from Asia. Asia, I'm sorry, I know it's midnight there, so thank you for staying up so late to be able to watch this presentation. My name is Dwight Mihalicz. I'm the president of Effective Managers, now launching the Effective Managers Academy. I'm a certified management consultant, which is the global recognition of management consultants certification. And I'm also a global instructor in the ISO 20700 standard, which is the delivery of management consulting services. So my company, Effective Managers, operates out of Canada, operates globally, and I'm just, again, delighted that all of you have joined me on this important day. So I have a few sections. I plan to do this in about an hour. I've got a lot of information for you. You do have slides which are in the chat, which you can review and make notes on. And please do use the chat for questions. I have the chat open here, so anybody that wants to mention or ask a question, we can do that, or mention any comments that you have. You can chat amongst yourselves. Milos, I see that you've raised your hand. Have you got a question for us? Or testing out the system, perhaps. Do just use the chat, or there's a Q&A section as well. I've got them all open. So let's launch right into it. So if we're talking about organizations, organizations are all about work. So how do we do work in organizations? And if you think of each individual inside the organization, each one of them has a piece of the puzzle. So what is it that I need to do today to do my job well? Most people, in my experience in organizations, want to do well. They want to be successful. They want their teams to be successful. They want their organizations to be successful. So they want to do well with their piece of the puzzle inside the organization. But once they get into the organization in the day, whether it's a manufacturing organization, whether it's the services delivery, they start getting pulled in all different kinds of directions. An unexpected customer call, a colleague is in trouble and asks for support in doing something. The boss assigns something that wasn't expected, or if you're the head of the organization, one of your team members has run into an issue that they need your attention on. Whatever it is, it pulls you away from that list that you have in your head about what it is that I want to accomplish today. I call that the shower list. You know, in the morning, you're having the shower, you're thinking about what you want to get done during the day, and then you get into your workplace and this is what it looks like. So by during the day and by the end of the day, your piece of the puzzle starts to feel like this. It starts to feel like it's not manageable. How do I get to focus in on my most important work? Why am I always working on things that I didn't plan on doing? Although I feel that they're important, I feel I need to focus on them, but don't get to what I call my real work during the day. So what Effective Managers and the Effective Managers Academy is all about is how do we help heads of organizations, executives, leaders of teams really understand some of the basic principles in organizations, those things that need to be in place so that we can help our members, our team members across the whole organization understand their piece of the puzzle, keep it the right size for them, ensure that they're working on the right work at the right time, and how, more importantly, those pieces of puzzle fit with everybody else's pieces of puzzle throughout the organization so that everyone is able to collaborate. So today, I want to give you some of the pieces of the puzzle so that if not to belabor that analogy too much, but I want to give you some of the pieces of the puzzle. I have documented a lot of this in the second edition of my book, which is The Effective CEO, The Balancing Act That Drives Sustainable Performance. So you can download that now from the chat. It is a free complimentary copy. If you want a paperback version or a Kindle version, it is available on Amazon, whatever your country Amazon is. You can find it there by searching for the name of the book or searching by my last name. So let's get started in terms of actual content here. The first and the starting point is the value proposition. So how do organizations work? At the end of the day, an organization is a system. It exists to do something. And what that organization does is it exists within an environment. So it doesn't stand by itself. It exists within an environment from which it needs resources and to which it provides resources. And it does that by taking input from the environment. It might be people, labor, it might be financing, it might be natural resources, it might be other things that people need to do in order to produce the output. And that output goes out into the environment. I'm just seeing a chat. Oh, the chat seems to be disabled. We're going to take a look at that in a minute. I'll be asking you to put some things in, so I will check that out. And Dwight, I can see only the top of your head, and the audio is flaky a bit. So I'll move my microphone. I do really appreciate people coming in. So those are coming in the Q&A. So let me just see if I'm going to be able to enable the chat here. So we'll take a little bit of a pause here. So sorry about this, everyone. Panelists can chat, attendees can chat with. Haha. Sorry, folks. This is my first time using this webinar version because of the number of people that are coming into this that it is making that issue. So the video problem. Does anybody else have a problem with the video in terms of me being able to see this? I have now enabled the chat, so everybody should be able to see the downloads and be able to chat there as well. Okay, if anybody else is having trouble with the video, let me know. Somebody said they can only see the top of my head, and that's not my best side. So we want to make sure that we're getting that. Uh, okay, so to continue on then. So we've talked about input and output. So the input to organizations comes from the environment. It is processed through the system and provides output into the environment. And what the system then does is what the system really needs to do is look at at how it can create the most value. So how can I take that input and add value to that input so I'm providing output into the environment which is valued by the people that want to purchase that from me. So if I'm a for-profit company, I'm selling things, so I want to provide something that is better value than my competitors or alternatives. If I'm a not-for-profit or government organization, I want to provide those services as effectively as possible. So that value added part is really, really critically important for us to be thinking about in terms of the organization and how it works. Here's the interesting part. From the outside of the organization, that system, the value add, what happens inside the organization is a black box. Nobody outside the organization really understands what's happening inside there that creates the added value for your organization. But those that are inside the organization, of course, have to be very much aware of what's happening inside the organization. And from the perspective of the head of the organization, they need to have that balancing act about how do I get it all in place. So we have things like our organizational strategy, which is our mission, our vision, our values, whether it's written down or not. There is a vision for what we need to accomplish, the resources we need to accomplish it, and how we're going to make those changes over time. There's organizational systems which get more complex over time, but how many layers do we have in our organization? How should we arrange our people and functions? What are the business systems and processes that we need, and so on? And then we add that the people. So people are working to accomplish that organizational strategy using the organizational systems to actually produce the output. So it starts to look pretty complex when you look at it in that way, because really at the end of the day, we're thinking about how do we get the right people into the right place, doing the right things so that they are able to produce that output that's going to help us to achieve the strategy. And who is the individual that has authority over that entire system? There's only one person inside the organization, and that's the owner, the CEO, the founder, whatever the title is, that person that's at the head of the organization, because they're the only one that has the oversight and the authority to make changes that go across the entire organization. And my observations over my career is that while that is intuitively understood, the understanding of the processes in place, how to impact those, how to get the right balance of all of that isn't as clearly understood as it could be. So a few years ago, I developed a model, which I'm going to share with you now, to really help make better sense of what it is that we need to focus on inside the organization. And I compare an organization to an organic being, which is a tree. Here's an image of trees from northern Ontario, my province where I live now. And you see these trees are growing on the side of a rock face. Now, you wouldn't expect a tree to be able to survive there, but it does. And in the same way, you often see organizations working under very difficult circumstances, but they're thriving. So how is that possible? On the other hand, you see some situations where a tree has died, it's just not functioning anymore, and yet ones that are very close to it are thriving. And it's the same thing with organizations. Many have an amazing business model. They seem to have all the resources available, and yet that organization fails. So there are the key parts of a tree, which are similar to an organization. So I've drawn a tree on this picture here. So, starting on the baseline is the business model. So the business model is like the bedrock for a tree. It provides stability. The business model at its simplest is what do I make and to whom do I sell it? So the business model creates that stable foundation for the entire organization. At the next level up, which is the topsoil, the nutrition for the tree, is the strategy of the organization. How do I differentiate myself in the marketplace to make myself more attractive than my competitors or alternatives? And the roots of the tree are grounded in the tree, are grounded in the earth, getting nutrition from the soil, just like the organization design is grounding the organization and providing that ability for the organization to be able to thrive in its environment. So those are all the structural elements for a tree. That's what kind of forms the ability for the tree to grow. These are the structural elements for an organization. If we look at the crown of the tree, there are three elements there as well. The first one is the culture. I think of the culture as an output because it's made up of all of the things that are happening inside the organization. So the culture of the tree is like the branches and the twigs. It shows the form of the tree. The culture is the form of the organization, how we collaborate together and work together in the organization, how we make decisions in the organization. You can trim a tree to change its shape, but you have to be careful and do it over time. Similarly with culture, you can change culture, but you have to do it carefully and you have to do it over time. Performance is like the foliage. You've got all the foliage is bright and green. You can tell that it's a healthy tree. You can tell the organization whether it's performing well through its financial statements. And then finally, the profit. That's what's left at the end of the year. The profit shows the success of the company, just as the fruit shows the success of the tree. So those are all of the outcome measures for organizations. How do we measure what we are delivering? What are the outputs of the organization? So what ties those two things together? It's the trunk of the tree. So the trunk of the tree is how do we connect that structural element of the tree with all of the outcomes that we expect? And again, there's three parts to this. The first part, like the bark, is the accountability and authority model. So how do we delegate work here, and how do we collaborate here across the organization? So we need accountability and authority language for how we manage, how we delegate inside the organization. And we also need an accountability and authority language for how we collaborate across the organization. The trunk of the tree, the strength of the tree is its wood. And in my view, that's the managerial leadership in the organization. Are managers doing their managerial work? How do we ensure that those decisions that are being made at the top of the organization are being implemented consistently throughout the organization? And then the heartwood of the tree is like the fit to the role. How do we ensure that we're getting the right people into the right roles so that they can be successful? And those are all of the people parts of the organization. Too often in organizations, we spend our time on that business model and strategy and the outcomes of the organization. So measuring our quality, our production, our sales, and so on, which is important, but it's not enough. We also have to think of all of those other elements that come into the tree. And without understanding what all of those elements are together, we end up with this kind of a whack-a-mole situation inside our organization where you solve a problem one day, it appears over here the next day, then a month later it appears over there. And that's a really frustrating thing for people to be able to do. So what are your thoughts? I'd really appreciate you typing in what are your thoughts about the biggest roadblock that stops you from being as successful as possible inside your organization. Or I see that I have some consultants on. How do you find, or how do you observe, or what do you observe in client organizations that are the biggest roadblocks to success? So please type those in. I will proceed and go ahead, but I'll be watching the chat and do that. So now I'm just going to take a pause on the content for 1 second and pause the recording. Now, I have a question here about where do I find the free book? So I have enabled the chats, and I do have the Effective CEO and the slides both in the chat. So you should be able to see it in your chat panel if you go close to the top. And if you click on it, you will be able to open it and then save it. So do have a look. If you're still having a problem with that, let me know. And at the end of the day, if for whatever reason security on your computer won't allow you to download it, that happens sometime, I can send it by email. So just make sure you let me know that you haven't got it, and I can follow up with it to email as well. Okay, back to it. So do think about sticking those in the chat. What do you see as the biggest roadblocks that stop you from being as successful as possible? So moving on to business model and strategy. Business model and strategy is really, as I said, it's part of the structural element of the organization. And there's really two parts to it, and at its simplest, many people try to make business model complex, but it's what do we make? So what are the products or the services that we have inside our organization, and to whom do we sell? Who are our customers? Who are our segments? So it's those two things together that perform the business model. So in all things inside organizations, we should try to keep things as absolutely simple as possible. Get down right to the basics of what it is that we do, what do we make the best? What services can we provide that are absolutely the best? And to whom do we want to sell them so that we're able to move those forward? I see some of the comments coming in now in the chat. Thank you. I appreciate that. So together, these define the business model. The strategy is a bit different. And one of the issues I see with strategy is most organizations develop a strategy which is just way too complex for the organization. It's been put in place based on models that are found on HBR or in textbooks that just get into way too much detail for the organization. We have to keep it really as simple and straightforward as possible. So strategy, let's take an example here in terms of developing strategy. And most organizations are pretty good at developing the strategy. So they develop their vision and they have this vision for, here you see the Pegasus. This is this great horse that we want to be 3 years from now. So that development of the strategy is right. The people inside the organization, led by the CEO or the owner of the organization, really develop an amazing strategy, and they have that picture. But what does the organization look 3 years down the road? It usually looks a little bit more like this. So the result doesn't match the vision. And this is not through lack of caring or lack of desire of people to do well inside of the organization. It's really because somehow the organization wasn't able to focus its people on doing the right work at the right time in the right way. So the efforts get diffused across the organization, and work is getting done. People are busy, but it's not the work that is necessary to help the organization achieve its strategy. So this is the kind of typical situation. We've got our current state. This is where we are now. We've in the strategy defined what we want to look like in the future. So this is our desired future state. And in the middle, inside the organization, we have all these initiatives, but they're being pulling us in different directions. So sales is looking to how we can increase sales, get the most sales in. So we have to start customizing orders, promise faster delivery, what might be to close those sales. Operations knows that they have to be helping with the bottom line. So they're looking at how do we improve quality? How do we standardize our production? How do we lessen customization so we can get more higher quality product out faster? Logistics is thinking, how do we improve our efficiencies? So let's ship weekly instead of daily, which undermines sales. So you get these initiatives that they're well-meaning and they make sense within the context of any one of those initiatives, but when you bring them all together, they start pulling the organization in different directions. And that's where the role of the owner or the CEO comes in and is so critically important in strategy execution to ensure that people are all pulling in the same direction so that you have a preferred situation like this and everybody is doing that work. So how does that happen? I call that strategic delegation. How does the owner, starting at the top of the organization, ensure that everyone in the organization, throughout the organization, is delegating the right work to the right person with the right effort at the right time? There's lots of rights in there, and it's not easy to get all those aligned, but when you can do it, it's magic. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next section about how can the head of the organization ensure that work is being delegated appropriately, and that's through having an accountability and authority framework. But before we get there, I have a little story to tell you. This story, does anybody remember this man? He was quite in the news a lot about 3, 4 years ago. His name was Howard Stumpf. Here's a long shot. He was sitting in a Senate committee in the United States, and he was the head of Wells Fargo. And what happened over the years of 2011 to 16, Wells Fargo was accused of overselling products, selling to products to people who did not need them, and to actual fraudulent activity of opening accounts for people that didn't actually ask for those accounts to be opened. So the bank got into a huge amount of trouble over that, and ended up paying fines in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And by 2016, about a year after this picture was taken, Mr. Stumpf was released from his role as CEO, and was replaced with the chief operating officer. So, so my question to you is, did Mr. Stumpf, as CEO, decide one day that as part of the strategy, let's oversell our product, let's fraudulently open accounts, and let's sell products to people that don't need the products so that we can increase our bottom line? So, I mean, when you state it that way, of course not. This is not something that would happen. But was Wells Fargo alone in Canada, where my native country? Um, CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, our national news channel, did an investigation into the Canadian banks and found that in every single situation, financial officers throughout these banks were also overselling product, opening fraudulent accounts, and probably not, certainly not to the degree of Wells Fargo, but then they're not as big as Wells Fargo. So we had that kind of situation. So what we have to realize here is that from the top of the organization, setting that strategy in place, a lot can go wrong in the execution of that. So by focusing in on those output measures, sales, a lot of the internal measures around people, what kind of stress are we putting on our people? How is my message being interpreted as it goes down the organization? And what are the implications going down the organization for our customers? So to me, it's an amazing case study of how things can go wrong if you don't pay attention to all of the different dynamics that happen inside organizations. So that leads me to ask you this question. What's the difference between these two people? They each have a pile of paper in front of them. The lady seems to have a crumpled up piece of paper in front of her, so maybe she's a little bit more annoyed. But anyway, she's obviously frustrated looking at her computer. And on the other hand, someone also with a heavy workload is smiling. And in the research I've done, and the secondary research in terms of reading that I've done, it comes down to a very simple word, and that word is accountability. Do people understand what they're accountable for? I would really be interested in your thought of this. It could be just a yes or no. Do people really understand what accountability is inside your organization? What is accountability? Do they know what accountability means? In my experience as a management consultant, when I ask that question, I get different answers from everyone that's involved in the discussion that we have at that particular moment. I did some research into this area before I started the company Effective Managers, because I really wanted to understand, why is it so often in organizations when we put these large implementation programs in place, after a year or 2 years or 3 years, things start to slide back. And I thought it was around accountability, so I did a lot of reading and discussion with clients about accountability, and did a project with the University of Ottawa, the Telfer School of Business. Actually, they call it the Telfer School of Management now. When I graduated there, it was called the Business School. But the idea is that accountability is really important in organizations, but how well do people inside organizations understand that? So coming out of the research, we had a finding that hadn't been understood before, which to me really opened the door in my mind and has helped clients since then to help understand this. And when we did the analysis, we found that there were actually two different dimensions to accountability. One dimension is felt accountability, kind of like responsibility, but not exactly, but felt accountability. So how strongly do I feel accountable for doing good work? And on the questions that we asked managers about this, the score is 8.88 out of 10 on a Likert scale. So between 0 and 10, how much do you agree with this statement? People feel accountable. People really do want to be successful. They feel accountable for doing good work. The second dimension, however, is clarity of accountability. So how clearly do I understand that for which I am accountable? And there the score is 6.93 out of 10. So not very well at all. If it was a term paper, it would be a C plus. So if I was in high school and interested in partying, C plus might be good enough. But if you're the head of the organization, is C plus really enough for this organization to be focused in on the right work and to be really clear about those things that we're accountable for? So this is one of the key takeaways for you. If you have one takeaway from this session, it's that whether or not, actually going to read it because whether or not clear accountabilities are set, managers are going to feel accountable for doing work. So the question isn't whether managers will feel accountable or not, because we know from research, and I think you would agree with me, from our own experiences, people feel accountable. The question is whether managers will feel accountable for the right things. And that's a systemic thing. That's something that we inside organizations have an accountability to do in terms of helping people understand what should be the focus of their work. One of the reasons that piece of the puzzle feels so overwhelming so often is that people aren't clear about what they're accountable for. And if they're not clear about that, then they're easily distracted into other work, which they know in their hearts is taking them away from their most important work, but aren't clear about their accountability sufficiently to be able to focus in on that most important work. So you can diagram this out. We've developed something called the 5 requirements of effective managers. There will be a couple of sessions on this in our Effective Managers Academy curriculum. Uh, so if we think starting about the manager in an organization, any manager in an organization should have a plan. It's the first requirement of an effective manager. Have a plan. It's got to be more than just coming into the office and kind of doing what comes up during the day. You have to have a plan in terms of how am I going to improve my team, my function or my team members over time. How am I going to ensure that I am helping advance the organization overall towards its strategic objectives? So I have my own value-added work to do. So I've got a plan. I know what needs to happen. Coming out of that plan, there's stuff I need to do. That's the second requirement. I need to do my own value-added work. Then we have to think about our team members. So now we need to figure out how do we ensure that our team members are as effective as possible. So there has to be a delegation process. That's the fourth. I've skipped one. I'm going to come back to it. That's the fourth requirement of effective managers. How do I delegate work to each one of my team members so that they are able to focus in on their value-added work and ensure that they are really clear about what they're doing and what they should be focusing on? You can't just take everything that I'm accountable for and delegate it to someone else. You have to take that work. I know what I need to do. So how do I chunk up pieces of that work that I need to do so others can support me in doing that work and also do their own value-added work in terms of things that are going outside of the organization? The third requirement is setting context and boundaries. And I put this ahead of delegation because most managers should be spending most of their time and doing most of their delegation work through setting context and accountability. So in other words, people inside organizations shouldn't be micromanaged. People inside organizations should learn and be able to do their work by understanding what decisions they should be making, what initiatives they should be taking within context that has been set by the manager so that they don't need to be doing all of that work all of the time. Then the fifth requirement of effective managers is setting feedback loops. So how do I understand that those people inside the organization on my team are understanding the work that's been delegated to them, understand the context, and if they run into problems or things aren't going well, how do I understand how well that is going and how we're going to be able to do that? So all of those things need to come together at the end of the day. So delegating work down the organization is one big part of it. A second part of it and the more complex part is how is work delegated across the organization? So I have another story to tell you, and this one is about an organization design and performance review that I conducted with a company here in Canada a few years ago. I tell this story, and I am anonymizing this because I don't want that company to be identified. Never would I tell a story out of school, but this example came up. I wanted to tell it because it so starkly tells us how wrong things can go if the cross-functional accountability and authority isn't clearly understood. So I'm doing this assessment review, and in order to do that, I have to talk to all of the managers in the organization. And every time I talk to them, I always understand about their work, understand about issues they're facing, and then understand about the cross-functional relationships. How's that working? And the interviews were going very well, very successful, large project management type of organization, and very highly rated, very successful, but felt that they could be doing better and that there were some hiccups. So my job was to identify what those could be. But in the discussion about cross-functional work in the interviews I was having, everybody seemed to be working well. They say, but wait till you talk to the people in finance or the people in operations. They just do not get along. So when finally the interview came up with the director of projects, I thought, oh, this is going to be interesting. Probably, this is the troublemaker that I've been hearing so much about. But when I got in to actually be talking with him, a very upstanding, dedicated, motivated, hardworking person with great ideas. Asked all the questions, understood his works, everything seemed to be going well. Asked about cross-functional, and the story he told me would raise the hair on the back of your neck about finance, that they were a bunch of uh, tyrants over there. They just didn't understand the real work of the organization. They were always getting in the way. I thought, whoa. So I asked for some examples of what was going on and got some of those examples. So when it came up for me to interview the director of finance, I had the same kind of impression. Wow, what's going wrong in finance that is causing all these troubles in projects? But again, when I got in to talk to the director of finance, she was again really dedicated, really motivated to do good work, really hardworking, had great ideas about the organization. Um, but when I talked about the cross-functional, uh, it was this will let you know that it was a project in Western Canada. She said they're a bunch of cowboys. They just don't understand how organizations work. They're always off on their own, and they're always causing me extra work because they simply aren't able to follow the rules. So I didn't really understand what was happening there. I got examples from her, and from her perspectives, the examples made sense. When I went though to talk to the CFO, then I started to understand what was happening, because the CFO was telling me about his role and how important it was, and that he was a director of the board as the chief financial officer, and budgets were critically important to the organization. So he oversaw all budgets and ensured that no department would ever overspend on their budget. So really quite a refined but very precise view of the role of the chief financial officer. Talked to the chief operating officer, and her view of her team members was very enlightening in terms of where the issues were starting to happen, because it being a major projects company, her delegation to the directors of projects was that because the projects were often approved a year or 18 months in advance, things changed, that they would often have opportunities to increase savings, or things might get more expensive. So sometimes projects would go over budget, sometimes projects would be under budget, but as long as they could come in with an even budget overall across all of the projects, she was happy with that. And that seemed to work all right. Until a project director ran to a project that was going over, sent the invoice to director of finance, who would not approve the budget, the expenditure, because it was over budget. So the only way then that the projects people could get the project go back to the capital allocations committee, meet with them, get an exemption, have the budget changed, and come back. And that's work that takes them away from what they would consider is their real work. So you can see how the context being set, as I talked about in a couple of slides ago, delegating down the channel can work maybe within each one of those two different departments, but the context is set so differently that when the two different departments tried to collaborate together, it created that overwhelming conflict. So as part of the project, I raised this to the CEO. We had a discussion with the CEO, the CFO, and COO. And surprising to me, this had never been raised with him. The two of them had had lots of discussions, but they had never raised to him and to the CEO. And this is another symptom that I see inside organizations. It's very often people feel that they're paid to do a job and they should be able to resolve these kinds of things on their own. But from the perspective of the organization as a whole, only the CEO had the context to be able to say what's best for the organization, not what's best for finance, not what's best for operations. So within a few minutes, the CEO made decisions in terms of providing a contingency for the COO, refining the context for the CFO about what monitoring was and abilities to make changes, and that if any project looked like it would be going above 10% over, that the two of them would have a conversation. If they couldn't agree, then they would come to the CEO, which is exactly the framework that should be happening inside organizations, but it wasn't happening there. So the lesson from that story, probably took a little more time with that story than I should have, but the lesson from that story is that when you're working within your own function or your own department or your own team, you have the authority to decide what to do and to direct people to work differently. So you're the effective point of accountability for your department. But when you're working across the organization, especially at the head of the organization, you have to set this context and boundaries across all of the functions that are involved. So in that meeting, what was happening? The CEO was resetting the context for the CFO and the COO so that they could have a common understanding of what was expected of them, and then they could reset the context going down the organization so that they would have that common understanding of what to do. I could talk about this all day because this is one of the biggest issues that arise inside organizations, and we will have a couple of sessions on accountability and authority specifically in the academy. So realizing that we need to keep moving along, we've got 20 minutes left in the hour that I asked of you. So managerial leadership. The question here is, how focused are middle managers in organizations? And the answer is not very. Um, Managerial leadership is like a link in the chain. So each manager in each part of the organization has an accountability and the authority to understand what's happening higher, receive the delegation from the higher level manager, and then chunk that up and delegate it down the organization. So they have a two-way role coming down the organization. They're delegating work at the right size for that role. And then going up the organization, they're providing feedback in terms of how well things are going and how reasonable the goals are that are in place. And that role is critically important. I've got this, I don't like to spend a lot of time talking about statistics in sessions like this, but this one is just so important. This data is so overwhelmingly strong that I need to share it with you. So Gallup every year does surveys around the world with managers and with their team members. So millions of team members and hundreds of thousands of managerial teams. And what they can do then at the end is they look at the top quartile. So of the most engaged employees, the top quartile of organizations versus the bottom quartile of engaged employees. So how do the top 25% of companies, as measured by engagement, do compared to the bottom 25% of companies as measured by engagement? And the results are astounding. So engaged employees, so those top quartile companies compared to the bottom quartile, 66% higher well-being, 70% lower absenteeism. They have fewer quality accidents, 30% less. They have lower turnover, 51%. There's some organizations they define as low turnover organizations where it's 40% lower. 10% higher customer loyalty, so it goes right through to the customers in terms of understanding and appreciating that organization. Higher productivity, and it goes right to the bottom line. And that's a big number, 23% higher profitability. So again, we can't get into details around managerial leadership, but it's critically important. It's one of those parts of the trunk of the tree that we need to bear in mind and why that's important. So we'll move now on to fit to role. So how do we get the right person into the right role in the organization? And here's a question for you to think about. If the manager of a team leaves, who is usually hired to be the next team manager? You can put it in the chat if you can, or just think about it if you can't. The next team manager is almost always the most successful team member. But in fact, that's almost always the wrong question, the wrong selection as well, because that person is not able to lead the team. And I'm going to show you why in just the next few minutes. So there's two factors at work. The first one is complexity of work, and the second one is human capability. So complexity of work is all about organization design. Human capability is about talent management systems. So if we think about complexity of work, I'm only going to talk about the first two levels, although there are 8 levels that have been identified. So if we think about level 1 worker, frontline workers, those level 1 workers come in and are delegated work to do that is typically done that day. Level 1 work is work that is or can be proceduralized. So it's do this, then do this, then do that. And if you run into a problem, then come and see me. So it's delegated in that way. They can be trained on the procedures and they can move forward in that way, doing that procedural work. The length of time that they have to do that work and prepare the results tends to be on a day-to-day basis, but it might go out as far as 3 months if you're a lead hand that's training a new employee, for example. At the next level up, the work changes dramatically and completely because that worker is no longer following procedures. That worker is now creating procedures. So they need to have a diagnostic capability in order to be able to understand the work and understand the workers and continuously improve both of them so that you have better processes, better procedures, and coaching and training your people so that they can perform as well as possible. So at level 1 work, it's a very finite decision set. There's a decision tree that can be described. At level 2, it's an infinite decision set. In order to be able to solve a problem, you have to gather information from many different sources, pull them all together, and then pick out those that apply to the situation and use your diagnostic capability to come up with a solution. The work there is done within 3 to 12 months, so diagnostic work takes longer. So managers of team members require that diagnostic capability, and individuals who are professionals, so engineers, architects, doctors, lawyers, all have to have that diagnostic capability because they're working in a world where there's an infinite decision set. They have to use a diagnostic capability to be able to do their work. So often in an organization, you'll have your level 1 team members. You'll have level 2 managers managing them, and then you'll have some level 2 individual contributors who are professional, like an engineer or a quality assurance specialist or whatever they might be. At the director level, again, just because of time, we won't be able to get into details, but in the actual series, we will talk about the director level of functions and serial paths. The vice president level, moving up to level 5 is sort of the level where we start getting into abstract work, where the head of the organization's starts thinking of strategy in abstract terms. So work happening at each one of these levels can be described and can be measured and is completely different. Now here's the kicker, and this took me a couple of years to really understand. I was working on an international project in Geneva, and the consultant that we had supporting us taught me about human capability. And at first I didn't buy it because we're taught, right? We're taught, at least in my generation, we were taught that anybody can be anything that they want to be. And I agree with that mostly. Anyone can be anything that they want to be within their capabilities, as long as they're working hard to achieve those things. Um, but everybody can't be anybody. I couldn't be an NBA player because I topped out at 6 feet. My maturation curve ended at 6 feet tall. I didn't end up being 6'6" or 6'8" and 220 pounds and being able to to be sufficiently equipped in sports to succeed at that level. So my body was not going to go in that way. It's a maturation curve. Well, the same thing is true inside organizations in terms of the problem-solving capability of individuals to work at different levels of complexity. So inside organizations, once we understand the complexity of work, we then need to understand the capability of individuals to work at that complexity. So some people enter the organization at level one and work their entire careers at level one work, and they're very successful at that. Experts in the procedures that need to be implemented, can help to train new employees coming on. Very fulfilling work, but are quite happy to retire out of level one. Some people enter the organization at level one. Their problem-solving capability matures. You see them start to mature and start using a diagnostic capability. So they start asking the what if questions. I know the procedure says this, but if we did it this way, wouldn't that be better? It's starting to question those things. Those are the people that are starting to mature and could become level two managers inside your organization because they're developing that, maturing into that diagnostic capability. That's why often your best level one performer, pick a sales team, you lose the sales manager, so you pick your best sales performer and make them the manager of that team. If they're your best performer, they're probably ideally suited doing level one work because they have that level one capability. And if you move them into a level two job and don't have the level two capability, they're not going to be able to add that value added work, that diagnostic capability to help the work and the workers to be better. So that repeats itself up and through the organization. So the bottom line lesson to be taken away from this, as organizations grow, the increasing complexity of work means increasing capability of managers. So you ask me, why does that matter? Well, why it matters is that organizations go through a maturation curve. So if you look at the age of the organization and the size of the organization, there's increasing complexity as the organization grows. So the kitchen table organization, somebody is making something and selling something, is a very, very simple form of organization. I'm doing stuff. But once that organization becomes successful, there comes a time when the owner, the person that has the idea, isn't able to do all the work. So they have to start hiring workers. So the nature of the organization has changed from a level one organization to a level two organization. And the owner of that organization now needs to operate differently, excuse me. So instead of doing the work, now they have to hire and train people to do the work. So now they're managers. If they continue to grow, then they have too many people to manage. They have to hire managers to manage people. So now they're the head of a level three organization, managing managers throughout the organization. That continues to grow to the largest organizations in the world, which are level eight, like the Disneys and the General Electrics and the Samsungs, who are managed through 8 different levels from the CEO. We talked about how far out people work. Level one is up to 3 months. Level two is up to a year. Level eight organizations are up to 50 years. So they're talking about generational goals that they have in multi-generational goals that they have in their strategies. So the point I want to make in this is that each level here, as you as the owner of the organization or as a consultant supporting an organization, will find that there are friction points as the organization grows through there because the head of the organization needs to operate in completely different ways. So a couple of sections. We're going to be a little tight, but I think we're all right for our time frame. The culture of the organization is something that we really need to be aware of. How does one change the culture of the organization? So how do you define culture? And does culture matter? So I'm going to define it for you in a minute. And does culture matter? Yes, it matters a heck of a lot. And I could take this saying from a management consultant that I have huge respect for, who says, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." Actually, I got about three of his books on my bookshelf behind me, but we won't go into that right now. So culture equals two things. There's two factors. The first one is the values. And most people, when they develop values in their organization, they end up on a poster and they end up on the wall. But values in and of themselves aren't enough. It's values plus the action that goes along with those values. So what are the behaviors that are happening inside of the organization? Because the culture of the organization is made up of all of the decisions that are made throughout the day. Thousands of decisions in most organizations develop the culture because people are getting consequences. They're getting attaboy, well done, well done's, or they're getting coached to do things differently, and they're all should be consistent with the values. But if they're not, then what's the problem? So you might have your absolute very best salesperson is leaving broken and bruised colleagues behind because he or she is ignoring all of the support systems that need to be in place. So focusing in only on those sales and creating destruction, or overselling and disappointing customers, whatever it might be, are the consequences that that person is being coached that this is not appropriate behavior? Or is the organization accepting that because such big paychecks are coming in and because it's helping the bottom line, that person will get away with it? So every day there are choices by the head of the organization, by the leadership team, and by every manager to reinforce what are our values and what does that mean to us in terms of how do we consistently do our work going forward. And whether or not that work is done, there will be a culture in the organization. The question is whether the owner of the organization will have a role in ensuring that it's a culture that's consistent with what they want to do. So the last section, I just want to talk about the Effective Managers Academy a bit. And I want to thank you for letting me give you this sneak peek into some of the systems and methods that we need in organizations. And it is a sneak peek. It's at a high level. In the first chapters of my book, I do talk about that, and I give you a little bit more perspective overall into each of those. And the intent of the Academy is to really dig deeper and to give practical examples in more detail than I've been able to give here through case studies and tools that people can have and take away with them to use immediately. So why does most training miss the mark now? It's because most training in organizations is at level one, and they're training proceduralized work. Do this, this is how you do this, and this is the order in which you do them. And if you run into this issue, then you do this, and then you continue doing that. So it can be described, and the training can be provided to people to just go ahead and move forward with doing the work. Level two plus training, on the other hand, is for work that is diagnostic or strategic. So the complexity increases, and it's not just the how do we do this, it's the how do we make the right kinds of decisions for our culture, for our organization, for our strategy. So training needs to be in the context of the organization, but it also needs to be in the context of the fact that there's very seldom a right answer when you're doing level two plus work. There's the right answer for these people in this situation at this time, or the best answer. And what we need to do is give managers inside organization the tools that they need to be able to make those decisions that are consistent with the strategy of the organization. So that's what we aim to do at the Effective Managers Academy. We don't want to teach people what to think. We want to give additional tools and processes and approaches to help people be able to make better decisions and to give them experiential learning. So case examples and ideas and insights, and that they will be able to actually put into work. So we have 20 additional modules. that we will be offering every second Tuesday starting today. So on July 8th will be our next session, and they will be moving forward. All of the training is in four different streams. So organizational effectiveness. So how do we get the foundations in place? Next one is around delegation, accountability, and authority. We have a number of sessions on that. Then leading people and teams, some of the softer side of how do managers focus in on the right work and how do we as managers of managers help them to do that. And then finally, enterprise leadership and sustainable culture. How do we really help the organization to be sustainable over time? So every session in the academy is practical, actionable, strategic, and relevant, and we want to give people real tools. So here's you have it in the download of the slides. This is where you can find the course list and see what all of the 20 courses are. It's a PDF, and you can get the register link to those courses that are of interest to you. We're keeping the pricing modest. In doing the competitive research, the pricing is usually in the hundreds of dollars per course. We're starting at $189 Canadian for each one of these courses, just to help people who are doing the work really get the tools they need to be as successful as they can. So in closing, thank you very much for your attention. I really, really appreciated your time today. Do write down in the chat if you have time any takeaways, or make a note to yourself. What are those takeaways? What are those things that you want to be able to do differently? And as part of this service and throughout the academy ongoing, I am the person who will be delivering all of this content, and I will answer questions. So as part of the service, if you have a question, if you're wondering how something applies in a certain situation, do reach out to me. And remember, it's all about work. How do we do work together in a way that makes sense for the organization as a whole, so that we can be successful and our colleagues can be successful in collaborating together. And then the final section of the slides, you have our resources. I have a lot of free resources on my website. Please do check it out at effectivemanagers.com. I'm reinforcing again the questions. So here are some QR codes in the handout that you have, where you can reach my resources page. We have a YouTube channel. We're live streaming on YouTube right now, and this will be available on YouTube, and it's also going to be on demand on LinkedIn. And once we launch the academy and have the online learning in an LMS system, so where people can learn on demand at their own pace, people will be able to register there, and we will have it there as well. And then do connect. Love to be connected with you on either Facebook or LinkedIn. So thank you very much, all. I do appreciate your time. If anybody has any questions, please put them in the chat. I realize I've gone 1 minute over, almost made it. But if you have any questions now, I'm happy to stay on for a few minutes to do that. Okay, not seeing any. I thank you very much for your time and your attention, and I look forward to hearing from you. All the best.